That jug of plain white vinegar sitting under your kitchen sink, the one you bought for $2, can do the work of 7 different products lined up on the garden center shelf right now. Maybe more. We have done this for generations. My grandfather never once drove to a store for a bottle of weed killer, not in his whole life. He reached for vinegar, and he handed that knowing down to my father, and my father handed it down to me, plain and simple, the way you pass a good tool across a fence. Here's the part that sits wrong with me. The folks who sell you those bright plastic jugs, they have no reason to tell you any of this, none at all. A man does not advertise the thing that empties his cash register, so they let it stay quiet. They let you believe you need the special spray, the special granules, the special powder with the long name you cannot pronounce, and you have been paying for it for years. I want to fix that today. Before I go further, do me one small kindness. Tell me down in the comments which state you are gardening in, and whether you fight weeds, bugs, or bad soil the most. Just a word or two. I read them, and it helps me know who I am talking to. Now, stay with me, because around the middle of this, I am going to show you how to clear a cracked sidewalk full of weeds for less than the price of a cup of coffee. The exact way we did it on the farm where I grew up in Holmes County, Ohio, where the lane was so long my brothers and I weeded it by hand every Saturday until my grandfather showed us the kettle trick. There are 17 uses in all. Let me give them to you the way they were given to me. Let us start with the one everybody wants. Killing weeds. You walk out to your driveway, and there it is. Crabgrass shoving up between the cracks. Dandelions standing in the gravel like they own the place. And your first thought, because it is what you have been trained to think, is to go buy a jug of the strong stuff with the warning label and the gloves you are supposed to wear. Stop right there. Here's why the vinegar works, and it is simple enough that a child can understand it. The acid in vinegar pulls the moisture straight out of the leaf. A plant leaf is mostly water held inside thin little cells. When you splash acid across it on a hot day, those cells burst and dry, and the leaf cannot feed the plant anymore. The sun finishes the job. Within hours, that weed is brown and curling. The kitchen vinegar you have is 5% acid. That handles young, tender weeds just fine. For the tough old ones, the hardware store sells a stronger garden vinegar at around 20%, and that one means business. But for most of what bothers you, the cheap bottle does plenty. Here is how you do it right. You pour it straight, no watering down, into a spray bottle. You wait for a sunny day with no rain coming. Morning is best after the dew has dried. You spray until the leaf is wet, but not dripping, and you aim careful, because vinegar does not know the difference between a weed and your prized tomato. It will burn whatever it touches. Now, Oregon State University did the testing on this, and they found vinegar can kill better than 80% of young weeds when you use it on a warm, sunny day. Better than 80% from a jug that costs less than your morning coffee. My grandfather did not have a study from a university. He had his eyes, and he had 80 years of watching what worked. But it pleases me to no end that the English scientists finally walked out to the same spot we have been standing on the whole time. Here is the catch, and I will be honest with you the way a neighbor should. Vinegar burns the top. It does not always kill the deep root of an old perennial weed in one pass. So, for those stubborn ones, you spray again in a few days. Patience. That is the only cost, and patience never charged anybody $22. But weeds are only the beginning, because if vinegar can do that to a weed, you might be wondering what else it can quietly handle. And the next one surprised even me when I was a boy. Cleaning your clay pots. You know that crusty white film that builds up on the outside of a terracotta pot? That chalky ring. That is mineral salt and lime left behind from your water and your fertilizer baked onto the clay over time. Folks throw those pots away thinking they are ruined. They are not ruined. They are just dirty. You soak that pot in a tub of 1 part vinegar to 3 parts water for about 30 minutes. The acid eats the mineral crust right off. Then you scrub it with a stiff brush and rinse it clean. That pot comes back looking like the day it was made. And here's a reason to bother that goes beyond looks. Those salt deposits are not friendly to your plants. When salt builds up in the pot, it draws water away from the roots, the very opposite of what you want. So cleaning the pot is not vanity. It is care. We never threw out a pot. Not one. My mother had clay pots that were older than she was, and they held geraniums every single summer. But a clean pot is no good if the soil inside it has turned against you. And that brings me to something most folks get exactly backward. Testing your soil. Before you spend a dime on lime or sulfur or any of those soil amendments in the heavy bags, you can get a rough read on your dirt with vinegar and a spoonful of patience. Scoop some soil into a cup. Pour in a little vinegar. If it fizzes and bubbles, your soil is alkaline, on the sweet side, sitting up above 7 on the scale. The acid is reacting with the lime in your ground. If it does nothing, your soil is neutral or acidic. Now, this will not give you a precise number like a $50 test kit. I will not lie to you and say it does, but it tells you which direction you are leaning, and that is often all a gardener needs to stop guessing. My father read our soil this way for 40 years and grew sweet corn that neighbors drove buggies to come look at. The garden center would rather sell you the kit and then sell you the bag of the thing the kit says you need. There is always one more thing to buy. Always. That is the whole machine. But your eyes and a splash of vinegar will start you down the right road for nothing. Now, here is where it turns, because the soil leads us straight to the plants that love acid, and this is where vinegar stops being a cleaner and starts being a feeder. Feeding your acid-loving plants. Some plants want sour ground. Your blueberries, your azaleas, your rhododendrons, your hydrangeas, which will even change their flower color based on how sour the soil is. These plants struggle in sweet alkaline dirt. The leaves go yellow, the growth stalls, and you stand there wondering what you did wrong. You did nothing wrong. The soil is just not sour enough for them. So, you mix 1 TBSP of vinegar into 1 gallon of water, and you pour it around the base of those acid-loving plants every couple of weeks during the growing season. It gently nudges the soil toward the sour side those plants crave. The iron that was locked up in alkaline soil becomes available again, and that yellow leaf greens right back up. A word of care, because I always give you the catch. Do not pour it strong and do not pour it daily. Too much acid, too fast, will stress the roots. Slow and steady is the way. The old ways are almost always slow and steady, and that is exactly why they last. And if this kind of knowing speaks to you, I want to tell you about something we put together for exactly that reason. We collected the most useful of these old-time methods into a pair of field guides, the Garden Blueprint, which covers old-fashioned pest cures that cost pennies, and the Harvest Blueprint, which goes deep into Amish soil and storage secrets for bigger yields. Both are also available together as the Complete Garden Field Edition. You can find them linked in the description below for $97, and everything in them was written the same way this was told to you, plain, honest, and built to last. Now, back to what vinegar can quietly handle, because for every plant that loves it, there is a creature in your garden that cannot stand it. Keeping ants away. Ants leave an invisible trail for each other. They lay down a scent, a chemical line, and the whole colony marches along it like a road. When you see a line of ants on your patio or up the leg of your picnic table, you are looking at that road. Vinegar erases the road. You mix it half and half with water. You spray it right along where they travel and around the doorways and cracks where they come in, and the scent trail vanishes. The ants lose their map. They cannot find their way to the food, and they move on. It does not poison your soil. It does not leave a residue that worries you when your grandchildren crawl on the porch. It just confuses the ants and sends them packing. We used this around the spring house and the pie safe for as long as I can remember, because where there is sweetness, there are ants. And where there were ants, my mother had a vinegar rag. Now, ants are a nuisance, but there is a bigger, slower thief in your garden, and vinegar handles that one too. Stay with me. Cleaning your garden tools. Your pruners, your shears, your trowel, your shovel. They get sap on them. They get rust on them. They get a crust of dried dirt and plant gum that makes them stick and drag. A dull, gummy tool tears your plants instead of cutting them clean, and a torn cut is where disease walks in. You soak the metal parts in straight vinegar overnight. The acid loosens the rust and dissolves the sap. In the morning, you wipe them down with steel wool or a rough rag, and that orange rust comes off, and the sticky sap comes off, and the blade is clean and sharp again. The English will sell you a special rust remover in a can for $10 or $12. It is mostly acid. You already have acid under your sink for $2. My grandfather kept his hand tools for 50 years, the same ones, because he understood that a tool is only as good as the care you give it, and care was free. And speaking of disease walking in, that brings us to the loop I promised you, and to the trick that taught Memmer than any other when I was a boy on that long lane in Holmes County. Here is how you clear a whole cracked sidewalk or a gravel path choked with weeds for pennies. Clearing a whole cracked sidewalk. You take your weeds growing up through the cracks, the ones in the concrete and the brick where you cannot dig and you cannot mow. You bring a kettle of plain water to a hard boil, and right before you pour, you stir in a good splash of vinegar and a spoonful of salt. Then you pour it slow, right over the crown of each weed, where the green meets the ground. 3 things hit that weed at once. The boiling water cooks the cells. The salt dries them out and poisons that little pocket of cracked soil where nothing you want is growing anyway. And the vinegar finishes the leaf. Together, they reach down into the crack where your sprayer never could, and they get the root that a spray would miss. That is the difference. A spray sits on top. The boiling vinegar water pours down into the gap and cooks the whole thing, root and all. We did the long lane this way every spring. My brothers thought it was a chore. My grandfather thought it was the cheapest groundskeeping in the county. And he was right. A kettle of water, a splash of vinegar, a spoon of salt, less than a cup of coffee. And that path stayed clear until the snow came. One caution, and it matters. Only use the salt in the cracks and gravel where you want nothing to ever grow. Salt lingers in the ground. Keep it far from your flower beds and your vegetable rows. In the cracks, that lingering is a gift. In your garden, it is a mistake. Know the difference, and you will never go wrong. Now, I told you there were 17, and we are just past the third of them. So let me pick up the pace, because some of these are the ones almost nobody knows. Cleaning your hummingbird feeder and your bird bath. That black mold and slimy buildup inside a feeder can make birds sick. Soap leaves a residue birds do not like, and you can never rinse it all out. So, you swirl a mix of 1 part vinegar to 4 parts water inside. Let it sit a few minutes. Scrub with a bottle brush, and rinse well with plain water. It cuts the mold and the mineral scale and leaves nothing behind that troubles the birds. We always kept the birds welcome. They earn their keep eating bugs off the crops. 5. Wiping down the inside of your greenhouse or your cold frame glass. Hard water spots and algae cloud the glass and steal the light your seedlings are starving for. A spray of half vinegar and half water wiped with newspaper, and the glass comes clear. More light, stronger seedlings, no streaks. Stopping cut flowers from wilting so fast. When you bring zinnias or roses in from the garden and set them in a vase, they droop in a day or two because bacteria builds up in the water and clogs the stem so they cannot drink. You add 2 tablespoons of vinegar and a tablespoon of sugar to the vase water. The vinegar holds back the bacteria, the sugar feeds the bloom. Those flowers stand tall for days longer. My mother had jelly jars of cosmos on every windowsill in August, and they lasted near a week because of this. Cleaning a dirty plastic kiddie pool or rain barrel. That green algae film that coats the inside, a vinegar rinse, a stiff brush, and it lets go without harsh bleach soaking into ground you might water your garden from. But here is where I want to slow down, because I know some of you watching are thinking, this is all fine for somebody starting a brand new garden with new pots and young weeds and tidy little beds. What about the rest of you? The ones who have lived on the same piece of ground for 20, 30, 40 years, established yards, old beds, big overgrown shrubs, soil you have worked so long you think it is past helping. I want to talk to you for a minute because the old ways were built for exactly your situation. My people did not garden on fresh new lots. We garden the same soil for 100 years and more. Here is something you can do this very weekend, no special equipment, on a garden that has been in the ground for decades. Walk out to your most stubborn patch, the place along the fence or behind the shed where weeds win every single year and you have half given up. This weekend, on the next warm, sunny morning, take straight vinegar in a spray bottle and hit every weed leaf you can reach. Then, come back 4 days later and hit the survivors again. No digging, no bending for hours, no expensive jug. And for your tired, packed-down soil in an old bed, do the fizz test I gave you earlier on 3 or 4 spots around the yard, because an established garden often has different soil in different corners after all these years of you adding this and that. You may find one bed gone sweet and alkaline while another stayed sour. Once you know that tablespoon of vinegar in a gallon of water lets you nudge the sour-loving plants right where they sit, without digging anything up, and without buying a single bag of anything. An old garden is not a problem to fix. It is an advantage. That soil has been building life for decades. You just need to read it and steer it the cheap and patient way instead of letting somebody sell you a fresh start you do not need. That is the thing about the people who sell garden products. They love a beginner because a beginner buys everything. But they have an answer for you, too. There is always a new product for the established gardener, a richer fertilizer, a stronger killer, a special tonic for tired soil. An entire industry built not on solving your problem, but on keeping you coming back. Dependent. One more bag every season forever. My grandfather was dependent on no one. That was the whole point of how we lived. And a $2 jug of vinegar is a small piece of that same freedom. Let me give you the rest, because the last handful are the ones that feel almost like a secret. Keeping cats and rabbits out of the bed. Cats dig in soft soil. Rabbits nibble your young greens to the nub. Both of them dislike the sharp smell of vinegar. You soak a few rags or old corn cobs in vinegar, and set them on little stakes around the bed, or tuck them at the corners. You refresh them after a hard rain. The smell tells the animals to look elsewhere, and it harms nothing. Cleaning the gunk off your gardening gloves, and your knee pads, and your harvest baskets. Getting fruit stains and grass stains out of your work clothes. A little vinegar dabbed on before the wash loosens what the soap alone leaves behind. My mother swore by it on my father's shirts after berry picking, and there were a lot of berry picking shirts. Keeping your watering can and your hose nozzle from clogging. The mineral scale that builds up and chokes the flow. The same crust that ruins a clay pot builds up inside your watering tools, too. A soak in vinegar dissolves it, and the water runs free again, freshening up your compost when it goes sour and smelly. Now, this one needs a careful hand. A compost pile that has gone slimy and sour is usually too wet and too packed. A small splash of vinegar can help, but the real fix is turning it and adding dry, brown material like leaves and straw. I tell you this because I will not sell you vinegar as a cure for everything. It is a fine tool. It is not a miracle. The honest neighbor tells you both. Waking the seeds. And this is the one I saved for last on purpose, because it is the one almost nobody in the outside world remembers, and it is the most useful of them all. Vinegar to test if your old saved seeds are still good, and to wake them up faster. Here is the trouble. Every gardener with a coffee can of saved seeds knows. You have seeds from last year or 2 years back, or some your neighbor handed you in an envelope, and you have no idea if they are still alive. So you plant them, you wait 2 weeks, and half the row never comes up. Now it is too late in the season to replant, and you have lost a whole patch of the garden to seeds that were dead the day you sowed them. There is an old trick for the hardest seeds, the thick-shelled slow ones, morning glories, sweet peas, okra, certain beans, the ones with a coat so tough that water can barely get in. In nature, those seeds wait through the acid of a fruit rotting or passing through an animal before they sprout. The acid eats a tiny bit of the shell. That is the signal that wakes them. So you take a small cup of warm water, add just a capful of vinegar, and soak those hard seeds for a few hours, no more, before you plant. The mild acid softens that tough coat just enough for water to slip in and wake the seed. They sprout days faster, and more of them sprout at all. This is the part that gives me a quiet satisfaction. There is real research behind it now. Scientists studying seeds with hard coats have found that a soak in a weak acid breaks what they call seed dormancy and raises how many actually sprout. They have papers and charts for it. They call it scarification. My grandmother called it waking the seeds, and she did it in a teacup on the windowsill every March with cider vinegar while she waited on the snow to melt. She did not know the word in the science journal. She knew the seeds came up and generation after generation, while the outside world forgot, while folks lined up to buy fresh seed packets every single spring because they assumed last year's were no good. My people just kept waking their own seeds in a cup of vinegar water and planting on. That is the whole story right there in one teacup. The knowing never disappeared. It was just kept quiet on the plain side of the fence, because nobody on the other side had a reason to remind you. You cannot sell a fresh seed packet to a woman who knows how to wake the one she already saved. You cannot sell a jug of weed killer to a man with a kettle and a splash of vinegar. You cannot sell a soil kit and a bag of lime to a gardener who reads his dirt with a spoonful from under the sink. None of this was ever a secret because it was complicated. It stayed quiet because it was cheap, because there is no profit in the truth that you already own almost everything your garden needs. So, here is what I want you to carry away from this. You did not lose anything today. You got something back. Something that was quietly taken from you, one purchase at a time, over years of being told you needed the special product for every little job. 17 jobs and one $2 jug does the lot. That is who you are if you are still here with me. You are the kind of person who would rather use what works than pay for what shines. The kind who trusts a kettle and a clay pot and a saved seed over a marketing label. My people never had another choice, and it turned out to be the better way the whole time. So, go check under your sink. If that jug is near empty, the next one will run you $1 or $2, and it will outwork a whole shelf of plastic bottles. And do this for me before you go. Go back down to the comments and tell me the state you are gardening in and whether weeds, bugs, or bad soil is your biggest fight. I asked you at the start, and I mean it. I read them. Tell me which of these 17 you are going to try first this weekend. Type it out. It only takes a moment, and it helps me know what to bring you next. If this is the kind of knowing you want more of, the plain and practical kind the old folks never wrote down, come along with us. This is not about following a channel. It is about a whole group of us, neighbors really, recovering what was nearly let go one simple thing at a time. Because next, I want to show you the 3 things my grandmother kept in her root cellar that let her store potatoes and apples clear through to spring without a lick of electricity, and the one of them that the modern world threw away first. It is older than vinegar. It is cheaper than vinegar, and almost nobody remembers it. Stay with me, and I will hand it down to you the same way it was handed down to me. If these old-fashioned secrets changed the way you look at the simple tools in your shed, please subscribe and like this video to join our community. We are unearthing the history they tried to bury and reclaiming the wisdom of the past. Let's grow a better future together. The next treasure of gardening knowledge will be opened soon.